Hello, my name is Amanda Cooper, and I'm a clinical supervisor in the school-based behavioral health program here at Wesley Spectrum. This presentation is on trauma-informed care, and the reason that I get to be the one that speaks to you about this is I've had extensive experience with a lot of our students in the City of Pittsburgh Public Schools that experience trauma on a daily basis. So here's trauma-informed care. What is trauma? Let's start with that. Trauma can be anything. It can be an event that has happened to a person. It can be a series of situations over time, and it can also be a set of circumstances that someone is living through. And these cause an individual to have physical and or emotional impacts that impede their functioning. This can lead to a person finding ways of coping that work in the short run, but not necessarily in the long haul. So as we talk about the 3 E's, we are looking at events and circumstances, experiences, and the effects that the trauma will have on that young person or adult. And really, trauma is the sum of all those events, experiences, and effects that come together and will impact that person as a whole. So some traumatizing events, it could be a fire, it could be a barking dog after having being attacked by a dog. It could be watching someone be very, very ill that is close to you. It could be experiencing a thunderstorm or a hurricane down in the south. It could be being a victim of child sexual abuse. It could be witnessing violence in your community. It could be homeless, hungry, and not having your basic needs met. It could be experiencing a traumatic death. It can be any or all of these things combined. So, important distinction between grief and trauma. So behind me you'll see that grief is really a generalized reaction to sadness. So it really doesn't make you question your identity, it doesn't make you feel guilty. The pain is really related to the loss of that individual. Trauma, on the other hand, is really a reaction of terror. It distorts and attacks our self-concept. It says it's my fault, I had something to do with this. And it really is related to tremendous fear on part of the individual. And sometimes if it's a child, the anger often becomes destructive, aggressive, and they will also see an increase in fighting. So the impact that trauma can have on everyday tasks, it really affects the prefrontal cortex and the executive functioning of the brain. So it will affect processing information, holding various conversations with people, someone's ability to set goals, being able to sit still in class, and in general remember and organizing things that you and I take for granted in day-to-day life. So some of the cognitive symptoms of trauma would be memory lapses, difficulty making decisions, decreased ability to concentrate, as well as feeling overall distracted with the environment around you. So trauma-informed care isn't really an intervention, but it's an approach that tries to aim to engage the various consumers we have that have histories of trauma, and for us to recognize the presence of some of these trauma symptoms and acknowledge that there is a role that this trauma has played in that young person or adult's life. So think of it, when we talk about universal precautions, that we always want to put a mask on and gloves on when we're dealing with a medical. This is really about an emotional universal precaution that we want to treat people with respect, kindness, and some sense of safety to their emotional well-being. So, and trauma-informed care involves everyone. So no matter where you work in Wesley Spectrum, trauma-informed care impacts how we interact on a day-to-day basis with our consumers. So it's really a shift on looking at someone and saying, what's wrong with you? And really starting to appreciate, gee, tell me what's happened to you. What have you gone through in your life? How can I help you feel comfortable here at Wesley Spectrum? And we start to ask, what is strong about the person? What are the resiliency factors that really help them to survive on a day-to-day basis? And quit asking people, what's wrong with you? It's really about seeing the resilience and the strengths and the things that they have to offer for us to help them in their continued services here at Wesley Spectrum. So some of the principles about trauma-informed care: safety. We want our consumers and our clients to feel safe when they come into our building, both physically as well as emotionally. Trustworthiness. We want to have rapport. We want to develop relationships so that when they're ready, they can trust us to talk about what has happened to them. Choice. We want them to have the choice of what type of services they would like, whether or not they'd like to receive medication management, what site they would like to be seen in. We want this to be them in control of what services they are receiving from us. And collaboration. They're the primary person driving their treatment plan and driving their services. So we want them to tell us how we can help them, and we will offer the services to meet their needs. And finally, empowerment. Our goal is to have the people that we serve at Wesley Spectrum to move on with their lives with their strengths, resiliency, and skill sets that they will be able to use in their future. So trauma-informed care is based on an understanding that we serve consumers that have neurological, biological, psychological, and social effects from trauma that are hidden from us that we cannot necessarily see when we're first introduced to them. And that for us to have an understanding that these experiences happen quite often in persons who are undergoing behavioral and mental health services. It takes into account that we have knowledge of trauma, and we use this knowledge across all departments in our agency. It also means that we assess and provide care that takes into account any type of trauma that may have happened to that individual or the family. We recognize that traditional service approaches can re-traumatize those we serve. So if someone has undergone trauma in a school setting, just coming into our school setting may be a trigger for them. And trauma-informed care is person-centered response, and we're looking at improving the individual's all-around wellness and well-being rather than just treating a simple mental illness. So ways that Wesley Spectrum embraces trauma-informed care. We recognize that coercive interventions can cause trauma and re-traumatization, and we provide training to our staff accordingly. We value consumer voice in all aspects of care, from intake through discharge. We recognize the person as a whole, including all the individual's perspectives and responses and those of their family. And we focus on what has happened to those we serve. We also do a lot with self-care involving our employee assistance program, as well as regular trainings for our clinical staff that continue to work with those that have experienced trauma. Trauma-specific treatment is provided at Wesley Spectrum. We have designated clinicians that use trauma-focused CBT as well as other modalities to provide services for those that have identified trauma as part of their background. And finally, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. So everything that we look through in our lives and what people have experienced, we watch through our own history and our own lens. So we need to be compassionate with those we serve as well as ourselves. Thank you very much.